She told me in front of my own son that the kindest thing I could do for their marriage was disappear. My name is Renée Callahan. I'm 58 years old, and 3 days before my son's wedding, I stood on the back terrace of the vineyard we'd rented, holding a glass of champagne I never got to finish, listening to the woman he was about to marry explain, calmly and sweetly, that my absence would be the greatest gift I could ever give them. I want to tell you who I was before that night, because it matters. I built a small accounting firm into a regional financial consulting company over 26 years, most of them after my husband died and left me a mortgage, 2 kids under 12, and a business with more debt than clients. I never remarried. I didn't have time to. I raised my son, Daniel, on early mornings and late nights, and I told myself, the way mothers do, that every sacrifice was simply the shape love was supposed to take. Daniel met Ashley 2 years ago at a conference. She was polished, ambitious, the kind of woman who complimented you in a way that always circled back to herself. I liked her. In the beginning. I wanted to like her. I told myself the small things. The way she redirected conversations, the way she started answering questions people asked me, were simply nerves, the ordinary awkwardness of a woman trying to find her footing in a new family. By the 6-month mark, Daniel had stopped calling me on Sundays. By the 1-year mark, I was hearing about major decisions after they'd already been made. The engagement, the venue, the guest list, through a group text instead of a phone call. I told myself this was normal too. Children grow, I said. Families change shape. What I didn't tell myself, not for a long time, was the truth sitting quietly underneath all of it. I had been slowly, deliberately, edited out of my own son's life, one polite exclusion at a time, and I hadn't noticed because it never once felt like a single decision. It felt like weather. The wedding weekend was supposed to be 3 days at a vineyard property outside the city. Everything paid for, quietly, by me. The venue deposit, the catering, most of the dress, half the honeymoon, though none of the invitations mentioned that. I hadn't asked for credit. I'd asked months earlier. For one thing only, a simple prenuptial agreement to protect the company his father had built with his own hands before cancer took him at 47. That single request, it turned out, was about to cost me everything I thought I understood about my place in that family. But what I didn't know that day, I asked Daniel about the prenup, was that Ashley had already decided quietly what kind of mother-in-law she was willing to tolerate. And it wasn't one who asked questions. She didn't argue with me directly. That was never her style. Instead, small things began shifting. I was seated further from the head table at the engagement dinner. My name was left off a vendor's confirmation email, by accident. When I gently brought up the prenup a second time, Daniel told me, in a voice that didn't sound entirely like his own, that Ashley felt it was insulting, that it made her feel like she was on trial, that maybe I should let this one go for the sake of peace. I let it go. I have spent a great deal of my life learning when to let things go. And I genuinely believed in that moment that peace was worth more than being right. It wasn't enough. 2 weeks before the wedding, Ashley asked me, over coffee, whether I'd consider stepping back a little during the ceremony readings, since, in her words, it might be easier for everyone if the focus stayed on the two of them, and not on old family history. I understood slowly that old family history meant me. That 26 years of raising her fiancé alone had become, in her language, a complication to be managed rather than a foundation to be honored. The rehearsal dinner was the night it finally broke open. I'd stepped outside for air away from the noise, and I heard my name through an open door before I ever walked back in. Ashley was talking to Daniel. Her voice light, almost playful. The way people talk when they've said something 100 times before, and it no longer costs them anything to say it again. You want to know the best gift you could give us, she was saying. Removing yourself from this family, tonight. I stood in that doorway and felt something in my chest go very still. The way a house goes still right before a storm actually arrives. Daniel murmured something about it being a scene, about it being their wedding weekend, and Ashley kept going sweetly, cruelly, telling him that once they were married, things were going to change. That the family needed less of me, that she and Daniel had a vision, and it didn't include someone she called dragging them down. I walked in before I could stop myself. I asked quietly whether I'd heard correctly. Ashley didn't even flinch. She smiled the exact smile she used for photographs, and told me that once I calmed down, I'd understand it was for the best. Daniel said nothing at all. That silence, more than anything Ashley said, was the moment something inside me finally, completely changed shape. I told them evenly that I should go. I meant it two ways, and only one of them was walking out that door. I sat in my car in the vineyard's dark parking lot for a long time before I started the engine. And by the time I pulled out onto the road, the wedding, though nobody inside that building knew it yet, was already gone. I called my assistant, Margaret, from the car. I asked her to pull every document connected to the wedding weekend that carried my name. The venue contract, the catering agreement, the vendor deposits, the dress payment, the honeymoon booking, all of it, quietly and legally covered by me for 8 months. None of it ever acknowledged on a single invitation. I asked her to begin canceling every charge and reversing every deposit first thing that night. I also asked her to pull the paperwork on the house Daniel and Ashley had just closed on. The one I'd co-signed and helped fund as a wedding gift. 35% of it legally mine by deed. I asked for a formal ownership review to begin in the morning. I want to be honest about what I felt doing this. It wasn't triumph. It was grief. Mostly for the son I'd raised who had learned somewhere along the way to see his mother as a resource instead of a person. And for the version of that wedding weekend I had actually wanted. The one where I simply got to watch my boy get married without needing to protect anything at all. By morning, the venue confirmed the cancellation. The caterer began refunding what hadn't yet been spent. The florist paid a deposit that quietly reversed overnight, called Ashley directly to ask what had happened. None of it was loud. None of it needed to be. A woman who has spent her life quietly holding things together will, eventually, meet people who mistake that quiet for weakness. And there is only one way to teach the difference. You simply stop holding. Daniel called me 11 times that day. I answered the 12th. Not because I'd forgiven anything yet, but because he was still my son. And some doors don't close just because they've been slammed. He didn't apologize for Ashley. He apologized for his silence, which was the only apology that actually mattered, because her cruelty had never been the real wound. His willingness to stand inside it without saying a word was. I don't know yet whether that wedding will happen, rescheduled or otherwise. I don't know whether Daniel and I will fully find our way back to each other. What I do know is this. I would have given them everything, freely, gladly for the rest of my life, if they had simply treated me like a person, instead of a line item to be managed around. If you've ever been the quiet, generous one in your family, the one who gives without asking for credit, ask yourself honestly tonight, what do you think happens the day you finally stop? That's the final order. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and I'll see you in the next one.